Welcome back to another episode of Junk with Junior, folks, where we're going to continue to make some progress on rebuilding this front end on the truck so we can get this thing back on the road after our little incident the other day. So one of the things that I've been waiting on for a while is the supercharger intercooler fitting from Edelbrock. This is the one that was in there from the factory, but it was a little bit longer. It was about that long, and it had a little step on it, and it had smashed it just on the end. So I actually cut that off in the lathe at the shop, cleaned it up, made sure it was nice and smooth, and it feels like it's going to fit nice and tight down in the supercharger here. Presses in right in there beneath this line, and it looks like it's going to clear the alternator bracket just fine once we snap this big quick connect fitting on here. So we're going to make sure this fits in there nice and neat, and then we can see if it clears our PowerMaster alternator. So remember from the last episode, the alternator pulley took a nice whack from the radiator cap, actually hit it, the flange there. So I sent the alternator back to PowerMaster to get it checked out, and my buddy John in returns up there, he's the man. The alternator had a little bit of squeak to it, and I thought it just needed a pulley and maybe a shim inside or something like that. That guy actually sent me a brand new alternator. Couldn't believe it. Not only is it brand new, but it has their new update on it. And I'm gonna set it down here because it's a little bit heavy. They actually put a label on it to tell people how important it is. But they put a ground terminal on here so we don't have to rely on the alternator grounding through the mounting ears. It's gonna have its own ground going directly to the battery. And another important thing is you always wanna have that ground wire the same size as your charge wire, so there's no issues with charging at all. So really nice upgrade there. Another little thing I did, the original water pump that was on the truck, I welded a number 20 AN bung on here, just like I did the new one. So the original pump, I'm gonna make that the spare, throw it in the toolbox, because when you run something unique like this that you can't get at a regular parts store if you're on a road trip, you need to have your own spare. So that's what we're gonna do. Lower radiator hose is gonna be 20 AN also. That's a Earl's water neck, just bolts right on in the factory location. Uses a factory thermostat, so nice and simple install there. No need to carry a spare for that. That's a billet aluminum piece, it's not going anywhere. So just been working on cleaning a little bit of this stuff up, and now we can get that fitting in there and make sure it fits tight. So I did order the correct sealant according to Edelbrock. They wanted to have the green sleeve retainer compound on here. It's a high temp, even though it's not really a high temp application. That's just what the stuff is. So we got the real deal Permatex green sleeve retainer on here. So it's gonna take up any little gap and help hold this in. I am gonna go overkill. I'm gonna put some on the tube. I'm gonna put a little bit in here just because we don't want this thing leaking. There's no sense in taking a chance on something silly like that. A little bit extra won't hurt nothing in this situation. That felt really good. Used a brass hammer because I didn't want to mess up the tip of this thing. It did press in there really nice, so I don't think we're gonna have any issues there. But for some reason, if we did have an issue down the road, I do have another factory straight one and a 90-degree on order just in case. So we'll always have those as a backup plan later, just in case we need them. But for now, we're going with what we got so we can keep making some progress. Okay, so our alternator bracket, power steering bracket's all snugged up. The fitting definitely clears everything back here. No rub issues on the back side of the alternator or the bracket. In fact, that heat shrink hose clamp that they use is just going to rest right against that nut, but it's not in a bind at all, so I'm good with that. Alternator doesn't squeak when you turn the pulley. That's always a plus. I am waiting on a power steering pulley installer. I had a remover that was completely shot and I could barely get this thing off, and it scratched it a little bit, so I had to touch up the paint on there because I don't want it rusting later. So waiting on an installer so we can get this on here. And once that's done, then we can take a measurement and go get us a belt from the parts store, get that engine dialed in. So pretty much everything engine wise is done, other than obviously the cooling system. We have to get the radiator in, build the hoses, still waiting on that stuff. I did get the core support halfway painted. So I went with satin black on the grill side of it, where it's gonna be, you know, hit and splattered with bugs and all that stuff. It's already got that done. It's getting a little bit dusty sitting back here, but that's all painted and ready to go. The inside and the top side, I've scuffed it, and I'm actually going with one of my favorite colored grays that's already on the engine. We're just gonna add some more of it on the core support there. I don't even know what I did with the can. Anyway, we're going with Massey Ferguson gray. I love the color. I think it's really nice. You can see it on the water pump here. Just looks sharp, and it's nice, a clean industrial look, and I think it's gonna look good against all the black. So we're going with some of that just to jazz it up a little bit in my mind. I almost forgot, I did get the battery trays painted also, left and right, because this is a 3/4 ton, so it had them on driver and passenger side. But this is that nice gray I was telling you about. I like it. I don't know if everybody else does, but just a cool look. So that's what we're going with. All right, it's core support paint time. So I got the front side already painted satin black, but the back side, the engine compartment side of it, all around the headlight holes, there's not a lot there to see, but I did decide to go ahead and hit that with some Massey Ferguson gray from Rust-Oleum as well, just to kind of break up some of the, you know, satin black thing, so we don't get too much of that. And I'm going to paint the top side as well, so when you pop the hood, you'll see that nice gray along there. So just what I think is going to be a nice little accent to break it up some and not have too much of the satin black going on. There we go. Definitely may not be what everyone else would do with their project, but it's not their project. This one's mine, and I do love me some of this gray paint, so that's what we're going with. Nice little change of pace, I think so. So I did have to invest in another piece of equipment and got the Lyle power steering pump pulley tool, so it actually removes it and installs it. But since we already had it off with the crappy old one that I had, now it's time to just put it on with the quality new tool. So got our 7/16 and 15/16 wrenches here, and we should be able to just crank this thing all the way down. All right, so we got that pressed on there all the way, and now we can unscrew this tool. The little adapter stayed in the pump with the bearing there. Just like that. Power steering pump pulley installed. So we're gonna put all this stuff away. Then I can take the old belt that I used to have, which is gonna be too long now, and I can cut it and route it the way we need to, so that I can figure out what length belt we need to get at the parts store tomorrow. All right, so there's always some kind of a little issue, it seems like, with my stuff, but I just gotta put my thinking cap on and improvise, adapt, and overcome on this sort of stuff. So our ICT billet, alternator, and power steering bracket works really nice. I thought it clears the frame by a country mile like I needed, compared to the other bracket they have, which moves the power steering pump, like the pulley would be like over here, and it would probably hit the frame. So we're good with all our clearance there. And I was starting to route a belt on here. I had the cut one, and then I had one that was still together, so that I could try to get it to stay in place, like the belt's gonna be properly routed for all this, you know, to drive properly. And what I ran into is the belt that I have is too short, but the supercharger specific alternator and power steering bracket that shifts everything further here has an idler down here to get more belt wrap, and it has another one in this general location here. But my bracket doesn't have that, and I have this old setup here from, you know, what we were running, and I kind of rigged it up here just to see if it would work. And I wanted to call ICT billet today and run it past them since it wasn't made for this, if my idea was okay. And they said, sure, drill a hole in it and then we'll know. So this idler was really close to this one, too close, but I just had it kind of pinched on this aluminum here. So what we're actually gonna do is, right in this ICT billet logo, in this thick part of the aluminum, we're gonna drill it so that we can install this directly in this area, so that we get more belt wrap on the supercharger pulley, and we still have plenty of belt wrap on the alternator. This idler gives us plenty of belt wrap for the power steering pump pulley, so we don't have to worry about it squeaking. And then once we do that, we can figure out the belt length and get us the correct belt on the way. And once we know we got the belt dialed in, then we can order another one for a spare, because I like to carry my own stuff, because you just never know when you're working with performance application stuff. Everything's a little bit different, and I just like to carry a spare, so then we can get one of those on order. Also, the transmission cooler and power steering cooler are still lying on the floor, because we're not going to put those in front of the AC condenser like we had before. We are going with Durali. So we actually got a dual circuit cooler, as they like to refer to it, and it looks like a really nice piece. So this one cooler is going to be our power steering and transmission. This is, I'll set it here so you can see. So this circuit is one cooler, and this circuit is one cooler. And the plan is, I don't know if we're gonna have the fittings pointing towards the driver or the passenger side. It doesn't really matter, because the transmission's over on the passenger side and the power steering's on the driver's side. But I'm gonna get some flat bar steel and run it across these frame rails and make our own bracket before the core support and everything goes on. And in theory, that's going to sit right in there just like that. It's going to have a little bit of kick up like that as well, because of the way the frame rail is made, but I think that's going to work really nice, and that's going to reduce some of the product that we have in front of our AC condenser and radiator. So in theory, those two should run cooler, AC should be cooler, engine can run cooler, and these two will probably run, I don't know, the same temperature, because they're still getting the same airflow. So we'll see how it goes. Got a few things to knock out here, and we're just going to keep making some progress. So what I did, I drilled a little pilot hole in that bracket, just a small, like a 3/16 hole, and I stuck that punch in there to hold that idler roughly in place, to make sure I can pull on this belt a little bit with my thumb, just to get it all snug and make sure we don't have any slack anywhere. So we got a nice gap right in between those idlers, no issues there. That gives us as much belt wrap as we can get on the alternator, and more belt wrap on the supercharger. We're past halfway on that, so I really like that. I don't think we're gonna have any belt slippage issues. You don't know till you drive it, but at this point in time it looks really good. So I'm gonna go ahead and drill that out and get us that bolt through there that's the correct size, and bolt it up, and that's one more thing done. That's what happens when you got a metric bolt and you don't have metric drill bits. You just got to fine tune her a little bit. There we go. Now it fits like factory. Idler, bolt, spacer. There we go. So we go on there just like that, with a nut holding it on the back side, and we'll make sure everything still clears. Okay, so now that we know how our belt's going to be, what appears to be properly routed, no slack anywhere, everything's lined up and looking really good. I actually really like having that extra idler right there. I think that's going to work out nice. I had my assistant out here with my cut belt, and I went ahead and wrapped it around this tensioner pulley as well, and pulled the tensioner down, measure our gap, and we're going to need a belt that's 2 3/4 to 5 inches longer than this one. So I'll see what kind of range the parts store has. They always vary a little bit, and get that on order. I'll get us a couple different ones, because you never know, sometimes there's little variants in them, and then I can just take back the ones that I don't use. So that's dialed in there as far as I'm concerned, and tomorrow night I will start cutting some straps so we can go across here and get that cooler mounted. There's our final belt configuration. Got lucky, I grabbed 3 belts from O'Reilly's, and we're going with the Gates Micro V KO6-1025, which is a 103-inch belt. Fits really nice. We got a nice clearance there, so we don't have to worry about that hitting. And our tensioner has the little guide mark there, and we're right in between the two of those, so we are good to go on that. That's not the belt I'm going to run though. Like I previously said, this belt's going to go in the toolbox of the truck, so I always have a spare just in case. I'm weird about that kind of stuff, and I'm actually going to upgrade this to the Gates Fleet Runner, the green one, like I have for the AC back here, which is what I used to run on the truck. So I'll get us one of those now that we know the correct length. We can order it. Takes a couple days to get them, and move on to the next thing. So now that we got that done, we are gonna get our brackets cut to go across here so we can get our cooler mounted. All right, so I've been making a little bit more progress. Went up to the hardware store tonight and grabbed some flat bar steel down here so that we could run it across the frame rails. 2 pieces there, 1/4 inch bolts to the frame rail and to the cooler. So we've got our cooler all dialed in. Looks pretty good there. Just got to hook up a couple wires to it once we get the core support and, you know, actually get to the wiring department of this. So nice little Durali cooler we got there. I think it's going to do the job quite well. I got to figure out what fittings we're going to use. It's going to be a little bit simpler this time. So they used to, you know, obviously go in front of the grill, so we got these long hoses that were way out here in the front. Now we can trim those down. This one, the return line to the power steering pump, I'm probably actually going to go underneath this cross member here and just run it right down and use this circuit. Not 100% sure yet. Once I get some fittings, I'll play around with it some. I have a few of them that I can reuse, but I have to reduce these down from number 8 to a number 6, and I have a sending switch, a temperature switch to go in there to turn this fan on and off. We'll put that on the transmission side, since that's probably going to get hotter than the power steering. And then we can do the same thing over here. We can run these lines. We'll bring them through the backside, tie them up nice and neat on the cross member so they're not flopping around, and probably just curve them right around and bring them right here into these 2 fittings. So that's about all the progress I got for now. Hope you enjoyed it. That's going to do it for this episode, and stay tuned. We'll keep making some progress on this truck. Next thing is going to be our radiator fans core support. That's going to be exciting because everything kind of bolts to that, so then we can really start carrying on and making some good progress. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next time.